Hello everyone, thanks for joining me this afternoon for another Instagram Live. Happy to be with you. I hope your day is good. I want to start before I get to some of the questions that have come in since a week ago and the ones that are going to be coming in now. I wanted to say a few things about the past 6 days. These past 6 days have been added on to 3 months of time that have been pretty extreme for all of us. And it's really hard to know what one can adequately say about what's happened in the last 6 days. We had the horrific killing of George Floyd, and that is coming very soon after the killings of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. So it's been a week of pain and outrage, and that really is continuing, I think, for everybody in our community. And as we're seeing all around the United States and even all around the world. I'm hearing from friends outside of the United States who are telling me about the demonstrations that are going on where they are. So it's been a pretty difficult and horrific time. I hope you'll read the email I sent out yesterday afternoon to the campus. Tried to say what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling, and I think what many of us are feeling, and put it in the context that we're in. In that email, I quoted from Professor Eddie Glaude Jr. He's the chair of African American Studies at Princeton University. And I heard him on Friday evening being interviewed, and this is what he said. He said, "Anger, going back to the ancients, going all the way back to Aristotle, announces that something just happened here. Put folks on notice that something must change. And it's not just simply a spontaneous act, it's the consequence of, shall we say, accumulated grievance. When something so big must change in response to anger, we feel we must take action, and Lehman College, true to its legacy, Herbert Lehman, and the legacy that he left, plays a part in that struggle for equality and justice." Last Thursday was also graduation at Lehman College, and that was a great cause for celebration as over 3,500 students graduated after all the work and effort they put in to earn their degrees. And we wish all of them well, and we also take a lot of comfort and courage in their graduation, and they're moving on knowing that they're going to be representing Lehman College, and they are going to be people who will make this world better. In the further words of Professor Glaude, you and I, and those of us who are committed to a more just America, a new America, we have to get about the business of building it now. COVID has changed everything. We can't go back to what was. We can't allow people to double down on their ugly commitments. We have to finally muster the courage to build a new America. This coming week, we begin a new fully online summer session, and we're continuing to plan for the fall term and what lies even beyond that. Together, we will continue to build. That's what we must do. So I will want to get to some of the questions that have come in since last week, and a lot of the questions have to do with what's going to be happening this fall. And that's now that we've finished the spring term, and now that we are beginning the summer session, the fall really isn't that far away. And we're also all watching what's happening around New York State and New York City. We hear that New York City may start to open up next week, at least in phase 1. And so we know things are changing. So what does that really mean for Lehman College? And you probably know that the other parts of the state, mostly upstate, which started reopening already 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago actually, have been in phase 1, which is meant to last for 2 weeks, to be followed by phase 2, which is opening up of another group of mostly businesses that have more sort of public-facing kinds of aspects to them, and those have begun this week to open up as well. And so that phase is also supposed to last 2 weeks in those places, which means that if New York really begins some phase 1 opening, that will last 2 weeks depending on what happens. And then it will go into phase 2. Phase 4 is when educational institutions begin to enter that and begin to reopen. So that would put us really 2 months from the middle of June. That puts us into later in the summer, quite late in the summer. And so at that point, our experience tells us that it's going to be a different world again. We don't know what that will be like. We don't know whether New York City will have continued to progress through those phases and on through phase 4, or if other things will have happened. We hope that it will, and because if it does, we know that that means that the COVID-19 pandemic has remained in check, that the numbers of hospitalizations, positive tests, in numbers of infectious individuals will have gone way down, which it has gone way down and will stay way down, because that's what we want. And let me just take that little side point to say we've all got a very important part to play in that. We have to protect ourselves, of course, but we also have to protect everybody else. I think our masks that we wear really ought to have a little statement on them that says, I'm wearing this for you. I'm protecting you, because that's really what it's about. When you're wearing a mask, what you're really saying to other people is, I really care about you, and I'm protecting you. So hopefully, New York City will progress through those phases, and so by the end of August, we will be at some phase of being able to reopen the campus. But we don't know what that will be like, and we really can't plan for a fully open campus in the fall, because that would probably land us in a position where we're really not prepared for what will happen. So the fall classes, we are planning right now to be almost entirely online or hybrid, partially online classes, so that we can, if we need to, have most of our classes run online. You've probably been hearing lots of colleges right now are saying we're going to be open, particularly residential colleges. We're going to have students back on campus, and that certainly is what they're hoping to do. At the same time, what I'm reading is a lot of skepticism about that, and sort of a sense that that is what these campuses want to do, but that may not be what they'll be able to do. So we'll see. We'll just have to see. By August 26th, when the fall term begins, of course, we're going to know, and we're going to know really much before that. But right now, what we're planning to do, and we're ramping up for, is an online term. And we may have some classes that on campus that really need to be on campus and really just can't be done in any other way. So we will get ready for that too, and try to figure out the logistics of how do we have faculty and staff and even students on campus and keep everybody safe. And of course, that's going to, we know for sure, is going to mean all those things that we've been doing. Hand hygiene, wearing masks, keeping at a safe distance, and being careful all the time. That's for sure going to be part of what we're going to do. But then there are other logistics that we just have to figure out, and that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 months. We're going to be working very hard to prepare so that we can offer a full fall session so the students can come to Lehman College who are new students, and students who are continuing can continue with their work. So that's really what we're planning for, and just keep watching. Week to week, we will let you know as there is new information and more details about how this is going to work for everyone. So hang in there. We want all of our students to be able to continue to register. We want to have the fullest group of classes that we can. So let me go on to another question that's come in, and this is a really a more immediate question, which is, where can I apply for emergency grants? You have probably seen that the college and CUNY, the university, has been able to receive some funding to distribute to students. The biggest amount of funding came through the CARES Act that Congress passed, and the CARES Act provided for the entire university around $230 million, which is a significant amount of money, and half of that money is to be distributed directly to students. And that has already happened, but not entirely. It happened for every student who had filled out a FAFSA form and was eligible. But it did not happen for students who hadn't filled out FAFSA forms, but it still can. So if you haven't filled out or didn't need to fill out a FAFSA form before, I really encourage you to do it. I know it's a lot of work to do that, but I encourage you to do it so that you can have that check either deposited directly in your account or sent to you, so that you get some of those funds to help you at least help somewhat with what you've been facing financially. I think it's important to do the FAFSA if you haven't, not just because of the funds that came through the CARES Act in this bill, but it's possible that there will be more funds coming. We don't know that for sure. If you're following that, you know how uncertain it is that Congress will pass anything. But I think they will in some form. We've been lobbying hard for more funds for higher education, and that could contain more direct funds to students. If it does, if you've done the FAFSA, you'll be set and you'll be ready. But that's not the only place that we have had funds for students. CUNY itself has raised funding for students and has distributed about $45,000 to about 90 students from Lehman College through that fund. And then the college itself has had a campaign for Lehman that's been going on, and we have raised also funds for emergency aid for students and for the food pantry. And a lot of that funding has already been given out, but we're continuing to try to raise more funds. To give you we have a little idea of how much of that funding has gone out or how many students have received that funding, it's in the hundreds. Hundreds of students, many hundreds actually, have benefited from the food pantry and also from micro grants. We're never going to have all the funding that we need. In fact, more students have applied for funding than we have been able so far to distribute, but we will continue to try very hard to raise funding. We received $150,000 from the Robin Hood Foundation, and that funding will be going out through Campus Life in the month of June. So that funding, Robin Hood asked us to particularly designate that funding for students who are not eligible for the CARES Act funding. So any Dreamers, DACA students, any undocumented students not eligible for Title IV are going to be the first in line for those funds, because we know we couldn't give any other funds to them that came from the federal government. So as much as we really do not like those limitations on the federal funding, we can't do anything about that, but at least we have these funds that we can distribute in this way. So if you would like to apply for those funds, go onto the website. You'll find links there where you can put an application in through Campus Life, and hopefully we will be able to distribute more as we go through the summer, and that we'll be able to keep finding sources of funding as we go into the fall. We're also working with our elected officials, who of course are also very concerned about their constituents in the Bronx particularly, and about students, and trying very hard also to come up with funding through their positions as elected officials, either from New York State sources, New York City sources, or from private sources. So all working on it. We're all trying really hard to address what we know is huge need that our students have. And it's the primary one, right? It's having rent, it's having a place, it's having food. These are the primary things that enable you then to focus on studies and your education. So let me go on to another question. I just want to make sure I'm going to look here at questions that have to do with the emergency funding, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything that's important. Okay, so I think I've covered most of the things. So I'm gonna take a look at the scroll here and see what else is coming up where there are questions. So here's a question: When we open, would we be offering more jobs to students or professors? That's a really great question, and you know that question has two contexts for it, right? The one is the context of the need for jobs, and you may have seen somewhere some mention of the fact that CUNY did a survey of all CUNY students, but we learned from that survey what students at Lehman College are facing. And what we found is that almost 40% of students at Lehman College who were working, and that's the large majority of students, 40% of them have lost their jobs in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic and the financial crisis that has followed it. So we know that many of our students are out of work, and that's a big concern. Of course, the other big concern is that because of the pandemic and because of the financial crisis that the country's in and that New York State is in, we're also facing a very, very difficult budget time. In fact, in all of my time in CUNY, this is really looking like the most difficult, challenging time for the CUNY budget. The state legislature passed a budget for the university in April, but it also reserved the right to change that budget depending on what state revenues were. And state revenues now we know are down a lot. The governor said maybe $13 billion or more in this fiscal year. That's a lot of money in the state budget. That's about over 10% of the state budget. So when revenues fall that much, it means, of course, that the state, not being able to borrow money for operations, has to find ways to reduce its spending. And the governor's always said that one of the main areas where spending will be reduced is education. Because education, K through 12 and higher education, is a huge part of the budget of the state. The overall amount is well over 35% of the state budget is education. So obviously that's a place where there'll be reductions. That's not news that we want to hear at all, because we've never felt like we had all the funds that we could use, do the most for our students and for our community. And now we are facing uncertainty around this. We still don't really know what the budget reductions will be. The governor has delayed letting us know. So we have to wait. In the process, we really have to plan. We have to submit a budget to the university by the middle of June, and our new fiscal year starts July 1. So what we have decided to do, the governor has said he would reduce education by 20%, but hasn't really made that firm. We've decided that we have to plan on a 10% reduction in our revenue from the state. That is a very, very big reduction in our revenue. And so that brings me around, sorry, that's been a long way around to answer the other part of that question, but that brings me around to hiring. And what we will try to do at Lehman College is to cut our costs in every other way than from personnel, because we think people are the most important. They are. There's no question. It's not a matter of thinking it. Our people are the most important part of the college. And so we want to preserve people's jobs. At the same time, well over 90% of our entire budget is for people. It's salaries and fringe benefits. So if we have to cut 10% or more from our budget, obviously we do have to find ways to reduce our personnel costs. We really don't have any other options to get that much of a reduction. And so what that means, we're not entirely sure yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to do that in ways that preserve positions, that preserve our faculty, our part-time, our full-time faculty and college assistants and other positions that we have. One of the things that we've done at the college, because we've been very careful with our budget, is we have gotten a fairly sizable fund balance, and that is going to help us this year. And so that is why, even though the governor is saying he's going to cut our budget 20%, we are planning on a 10% cut, which is less than that. That's because we have a fund balance that we can draw on. Can't use it all because we have to go into the next fiscal year, which would be fiscal year 22, with some of that fund balance intact, or we know we're going to be in trouble there. But we're going to use some of it, and that's going to help. And so our strategy is going to be to preserve our programs, to preserve our people, to offer the classes that students need. We hope we can offer all the classes that we hope to offer so that students can get the classes they need to work on their degrees and move towards graduation. So another question that goes back to the fall semester, will the college be open? So I can say a little more about that. I've talked about it in terms of getting ready to teach online and possibly having some classes like lab classes and studio classes in some way done on campus. But will the campus be open? Well, the college probably will be open to some degree in the fall. We just don't know what that will really look like. One of the things I'm doing university-wide is I'm working on the task force. It's called the COVID-19 Response Task Force for the university, and we are very actively involved in working out how campuses can open up. How would we do things like testing, screening as we come onto campus? How would we open up areas so that the distance is safe? And that, just to divert a little bit, a safe distance isn't 6 feet. That really depends a lot on where you are. If you're outside, it's 6 feet, maybe, we hope, if you have a mask on. If you're inside in an enclosed area, it can be something really different. So it's really complicated to figure out how do we bring students back on campus, how do we bring faculty and staff. One of the things that we tried to keep open in March, but unfortunately could not keep open very long because of how severe the pandemic became and how suddenly that happened, were areas like the library and the computer rooms, where we have resources that many students need to do their work. These are areas that if we can, we hope we can open up in some way, in a safe way, in the fall so that students would be able to access them. Again, we don't know for sure that we can do that, but that's certainly a goal. We'd like to be able to have resources available for students so that if they don't have the best computing resources or if they're library resources they need, that somehow we could make those available. So that's what we're working on. The whole university is working on that, trying to develop plans, and then Lehman College also has a task force that's working on that, and will do that in accordance with the broader university plans, but tailored in a way that works for Lehman College because of our own unique situation. So there's another question here about communicating on registration and with the registrar, and I think that's a really important point. How do you get other services taken care of, whether it's registrar, whether it's the bursar, things that don't have to do with taking classes, but are the things that enable you to sign up for classes and get financial aid and so on. We had to very quickly move most of those kinds of services off campus, and so they're now being done by commuting, by telework, by the staff that take care of those areas. And we've done a lot to try to beef up all of the computer resources that are needed to do that. We will continue to do that, and my anticipation is we will continue to do a lot of that in the fall remotely. The best line for defending everybody is to have as few people on campus as we can, but still to be as functional as we need to be. And so if those services can be done fully remotely, then I expect that we will continue to do that in the fall. However, we will be working probably to bring some of those on campus that really aren't quite able to do what they need to do to facilitate students being able to get the things taken care of that they need to take care of in order to register and to enter the fall term. One of the questions I think I saw come across is around the bookstore and how are you going to get books? And that actually is something that we began talking about and planning for this week. And so I'll just keep checking the communications that come out from me or come out from the provost or other parts of the campus, and also check the website. We'll continue to work on keeping that up to date with that kind of information, so you'll know how you can get your books, how you can get the resources that you need. So if you go to the home page, you will find the Lehman College homepage. You'll find links there. And in fact, we've created a whole kind of home page within the Lehman College website that deals with services for students. So look for that, and you should find links to most of what you need. But just be aware that we keep updating it. Every week we're planning, and every week it's developing. And so as those developments become really clear, then we're going to put that information up there. Of course, we want to get it up there as quickly as possible, because even though we're just going into the summer session, we know how quickly that goes and how quickly August 26th arrives, and it's the fall term. So do stay tuned. And as we have more of these Instagram Live sessions, or I also am doing a President's Briefing on Thursday afternoons, which you can also join. And there's new information like that. We'll try to make that available. So we're trying to use a lot of different ways to get information out to you. And so hopefully one of those ways will work for you, and you'll be able to find it. So we're at the end of our 30 minutes for this session. And I want to just thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for all the support that you've expressed. I want to thank you for the support that you've given each other. It's been really impressive to watch the way the staff and the faculty and students have worked together in this really tough time. And I know that the spring term was far from perfect for all of us, and it was really a challenge. But I also saw how everybody really just dealt with it and did the best they could. And we did get through it. So I'm happy to say we had a graduation. We got through it. We are going to keep moving forward. Thank you all for hanging in there. And I'll see you at our next session.